Hi everybody, it's me again. We're continuing today in our study on Joseph, our series of sermons on Joseph, and we're in we're in Genesis chapter 40, and the title is "Where is God when it all goes wrong?" A question that I'm sure all of us have asked more than once in our lives, and we need to read part of chapter 40. So I'll just get my Bible, we'll do that now. So from verse 1. It came to pass after these things that the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief butler and the chief baker, so he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard in the prison, the place where Joseph was confined. And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them, so they were in custody for a while. Then the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison, had a dream, both of them, each man's dream in one night, and each man's dream with its own interpretation. And Joseph came into them in the morning, and looked at them and saw that they were sad. So he asked Pharaoh's officers, who were with him in the custody of his lord's house, saying, "Why do you look so sad today?" And they said to him, "We each have had a dream, and there is no interpreter of it." So Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell them to me, please." Then the chief butler told his dream to Joseph and said, "Behold, in my dream, a vine was before me, and in the vine were 3 branches. It was as though it budded, its blossoms shot forth, its clusters brought forth ripe grapes. Then Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand." And Joseph said to him, "This is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches were 3 days. Now within 3 days Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your place, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand according to the former manner, when you were his butler. But remember me when it is well with you, and please show kindness to me. Make mention of me to Pharaoh, and get me out of this house. For indeed I was stolen away from the land of the Hebrews, and also I have done nothing here that they should put me into the dungeon." When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said to Joseph, "I also was in my dream, and there were 3 white baskets on my head. In the uppermost basket were kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, and the birds ate them out of the basket." So Joseph answered and said, "This is the interpretation of it. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head from you and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh from you." Now it came to pass on the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast for all his servants. And he lifted up the head of the chief butler and of the chief baker among his servants. Then he restored the chief butler to his butlership again, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted to him. Yet the chief butler did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. Amen. Quite a story. Joseph is in prison, but he's actually in charge of the prison. That's the favour of God, that everything he touched prospered. Everything he touched prospered. But at the same time, he's shut off, he's shut up, and he's shut down. He's shut up in prison. He's shut down from being able to do anything outside of his confines. And he's shut off from a few comforts that he had at Potiphar's house. Sometimes life can lead us into prison situations, hardships and trials that we can't see a way out of. That is just the way of life. I'm sure we've all experienced this, that no one goes through life without experiencing some pain. We can feel that everybody has forgotten us, and sometimes we can actually be forgotten by those who know us best. Prison can be a solitary place. It doesn't have to be a place where you're locked up physically either. It can be a mental prison, an emotional prison. The cell walls can be invisible, but they're still there in your mind, just as real as if you were actually locked up. But even if the whole world forgets us, even if the world were to write us off and leave us in the prisons of life, there is one who will never forget, one who will never leave us or forsake us while we're locked away in our troubles. Hebrews 13 verse 5 says this, let your conduct be without covetousness. Be content with such things as you have. For he himself has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. So the baker and the cupbearer are in prison. We don't know what for, don't know what they've done. But they were important men. The cupbearer was the king's food taster. So he made sure that the food was not poisoned, and if anybody was going to die, it would have been him. Nehemiah was also a cupbearer to a king, King Artaxerxes. Now the baker was a prominent man as well. He had access to Pharaoh. These two men would have had time to talk to Pharaoh, to listen to him, and their trusted servants who had the king's ear, but somehow they end up in prison. They must have done something to upset him. When these men get to prison, they get preferential treatment. They're treated like the celebrities of our day. They even have a servant assigned to minister to their needs. Joseph is handpicked just for that job also there. So his duties now include looking after the needs of two VIPs as well as everything else that goes on in the prison. Joseph is handpicked because the warden knows he is more than capable. On the surface, this seems to be just another assignment given to a slave in the prison. In reality, it's the providence of a sovereign God at work in Joseph's life. God had just brought Joseph face to face with the man God would use later to secure Joseph's release from prison. We should never discount the seemingly small twists and turns of life. Some people would have said, oh well, just another job for poor old Joseph to take care of. What no one could see was how God would use this small matter in a great way just down the road. Never discount those small moves of life. What we see as a chance encounter may just be the meeting of a lifetime. What we see as an accident or a coincidence, and I've always called them God incidents, because we never know where they're going to lead us. It really is God at work in your life in a great way. So the Bible tells us that sometime later these two men had a fitful night's sleep in which they had dreams that really bothered them the next day. And Joseph noticed this when he went to see them in the morning, and he asked what was wrong. And when he heard that they both had dreams, it must have made his mind go back to his own dreams that he had way back in Genesis 37 when he was, a teenager getting up the nose of his older brothers, as teenagers do. His dreams, however, looked as if they'd been derailed or at least delayed for the past few years. Try and put yourself in Joseph's place today. He's been given a dream from God. In that dream, he is going to rule someday, somewhere. His dream has yet to be fulfilled, but in fact, from all appearances, Joseph's dreams have all been shattered. Now, what does Joseph do? Does he get angry and give up on God? Does he say, I'm finished with all this? Just leave me alone. Even though Joseph finds himself in kind of one of those waiting rooms of life, he doesn't lose grip on his dreams or on the God who gave them to him. In fact, Joseph is actively looking for ways to glorify God while he was in that prison. There are going to be some times along the way when it does seem like God has forgotten all about you. There are times when it seems that your dreams have been derailed. There are times when you find yourself in one of those waiting rooms of life where you're asking God for what happens next, what direction do I go, and nothing. Because the skies are like brass and the voice of God is just not apparent. It's what you do in those times. Whilst you're sat in that waiting room of life, waiting for the next step in your journey, it's what you do there has a great deal to do with what the Lord will do for you later. Our duty in all the prisons of life, in all the waiting rooms of life, is to actively seek ways to glorify Him. Our circumstances might be bad, but our God is good. We need to learn how to glorify Him when the sun is shining and when the rain is falling. We need to look for ways to point others to Him, even though our own hearts are breaking. If He is the God of the mountain, He is also the God of the valley, or He is God of neither. The dreams of the butler and the baker were fulfilled, just as Joseph said they would be. The butler was restored to office, the baker was executed. The cupbearer went first, the butler, that is, describing his unusual dream of a vine that budded and blossomed and bore fruit. And it's here that Joseph made his plea. When he's given him the interpretation of the dream, he says to this man, "Only remember me when it's well with you, and please do me the kindness to mention me to Pharaoh, and so get me out of this habitation, get me out of this prison. For I was stolen out of the land of the Hebrews, and here I've also done nothing that they should put me into a pit." You can almost hear the cupbearer, this butler, saying, "Yeah, sure I will, of course I will. I'll do everything I can to get you out. How would I not help the man who's just helped me?" The baker shared his dreams of 3 baskets of birds eating the food, and Joseph gave him a very different but God-illuminated interpretation that within 3 days he'd be dead, hanged and left for the scavenger birds. And the 3 days passed, and sure enough, things happened exactly as Joseph said. Pharaoh restored the butler to his position, and he's there putting the cup in Pharaoh's hand whenever Pharaoh is thirsty. But he hanged the chief baker. And now here's the sting in the tail. The chief cupbearer, the butler, did not remember Joseph, but he forgot him. I guess in all the excitement of being restored to his position, I guess he just simply forgot. I would imagine those days that immediately followed the cupbearer's release made Joseph's work easier, because he'd be thinking, wouldn't he, any day now I'll be pardoned. Any day now they're going to come and say, "Joseph, come on out of the prison, we're going to set you free." But days turned to weeks, and weeks turned to months, and all the lights of hope must have gone out for Joseph. But the intensity of Joseph's losses is magnified by one more element: that time. The very next recorded verse, chapter 41, verse 1, opens with this: after 2 whole years. 2 years. You know, it's one thing to experience a sudden tragedy in life, like the loss of a child or the discovery of some dread disease in your body, or being imprisoned for crimes you didn't commit. It's quite another to experience the relentless misery of that loss for months or even years afterwards. I can imagine Joseph, I can see him in my mind's eye, where after the butler is released, he goes back to his cell thinking, I better pack all my stuff. He probably didn't have a lot of stuff, but he's thinking, that man is going to tell Pharaoh about me and about this miscarriage of justice that I've been put under, and I will be set free. I'm sure every time that prison door opened, Joseph thought it was some people coming to take him out of there. But the butler forgot him. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months, months into 2 long years. And all the time Joseph is in his prison. Disappointed, yes, but waiting on God. How did Joseph endure this without losing faith in God? That's probably another question that we've all asked ourselves from time to time. How did he avoid the conclusion that God wasn't toying with him, raising his hopes only to crush them? How did he keep from becoming a bitter, resentful, angry, vengeful man? as he faced the prospect of dying in a dungeon in a foreign country. That prison disappointment served to teach Joseph two valuable lessons, and they're lessons that we could probably learn as well. First of all, Joseph learned that he should never put his confidence in a man, any man. He tried to get help from human sources, but that failed. The fact is that sometimes there is no real help in man. Our only help comes from the Lord. He may use humans as his instruments, but behind the provision is the hand of the Almighty. And secondly, Joseph learned once again that God's unseen hand moves us along a hidden pathway. He would like to have been freed long ago, before he was, but that wasn't in God's timing. When the right time came, Joseph was released and not a minute before. We need to learn this truth. Our God is never early, but he's also never late. He always moves right on time. When did he feed Elijah? Morning and evening, right on time. When did he rescue the three Hebrew boys from the furnace? Not when they would have liked, which was before they got thrown in, but right on time. When did he help Daniel? Not when Daniel would have wanted it, but right on time. When did Jesus come to his men on the sea in a stormy night? Not when they thought they needed him, but right on time. Joseph shows iron faith when everything about him seems to go wrong. Keep the conviction that God reigns over all the details of your life, from the greatest to the smallest. It is amazing that the most common means people use these days to solve the mystery of suffering never even occurred to Joseph or Job or Paul. Those who suffered so much for their testimony never once expressed any sense that God is limited in what he has control over. But that seems to be the first instinct in our day when tragedy strikes or injustice is done. God couldn't have willed that sickness or that explosion or that wreck. We create exemption clauses that we think protect God when hard things happen. All through Joseph's experiences, there is no indication that he followed this line of thinking. Instead, by example and by word, he held to the conviction that God reigns. I've said this before, that the banner that hangs over Joseph's life is one that he never read, because it was written by Paul a couple of thousand, maybe 3,000 years after Joseph was dead. And it says this: we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. Romans 8:28. That verse means absolutely nothing if God is not in complete control over the events and details of our lives. His rule over all the details of my life is the ground of my hope, the assurance that justice will have the last word, and the promise that this life cannot compare to what he has in store for me in the next. This is a pretty bad place to leave our hero. He's done the right things every time he had a chance, and still he suffers for righteousness' sake. And there he stands, falsely accused, wrongly imprisoned, and now he's also forgotten. To kind of add to the pain and the misery, he's actually still in Potiphar's house. He's in the dungeon beneath. A lot of commentators believe that he's in the dungeon beneath Potiphar's house because the captain of the guard was also in charge of the prison. Joseph can't see it, but the wheels of providence are slowly advancing. My grandmother used to say the mills of God grind slowly, but they grind exceedingly small. And so God is working out the details. He's slowly but surely lining up everything in Joseph's life, just the way it needs to be, so everything is in a straight line. Soon the plans and purposes of God will become crystal clear. The same is true in your life as well and in my life. Some of you are looking at disappointments and discouragements and you do not know how to handle them. The best thing you can do is bring them to the Lord. Learn to leave them in his capable hands and ask him for the joy and grace you need to survive and thrive in those prisons or waiting rooms of life. There is help for you in the Lord. You might feel forgotten, but I hope you know that you will never, ever be forsaken by Him. Amen. Thank you.